Welcome back. It's a quadrennial political parlor game, guessing who might share the ticket with the party's presidential nominee. Joe Biden has pledged to pick a woman, and he's considered more than a dozen. 3 names stand out right now as likely finalists. Senator Kamala Harris of California, former National Security Advisor Ambassador Susan Rice, and Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. Bass is the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus and has been a leading voice on police reform. She's also largely unknown nationally, but she's now seen as a finalist among finalists, if you will, in the so-called VP race. And Karen Bass joins me now. Congresswoman Bass, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thanks for having me on, Chuck.
Let me ask this. I know nobody runs for the vice presidency, and that people shy away from that. But let me ask you a question this way. Why'd you decide to go through this vetting process?
Well, mainly because I am so concerned with where we are in our country right now. 154,000 dead Americans from COVID virus. Our country ripped apart because of race, the policing issues, the economic devastation that we're facing. All of these issues is the reason why I submitted myself to a very interesting process, a trip down memory lane.
Is there something about the post itself that is appealing to you if you did end up as Vice President of the United States?
Well, to me, being a partner with somebody who I have deep respect for, with somebody who I believe is authentic, is genuine, has the capacity to have empathy, has tremendous experience, and working alongside of him, aside from being considered as a tremendous honor. But all of that is the reason why I would want to go forward with this.
You've not been somebody who, at least we in political circles, have known as someone with presidential ambitions.
Exactly.
Let me ask you this. Why haven't you considered running for president before? And by agreeing to this, I know it doesn't mean you want to run for president in the future.
Right.
But a lot of people certainly think you will.
Exactly. But you know what, Chuck? In my life, I have always been focused on the work. And you can look through my past, and I think it's pretty clear that I didn't set out in my life to run for president. I have focused on doing the work in a lot of different ways. My focus has been on trying to do everything I could to make our nation a more perfect union, especially for those people who are the most marginal, those people who are often not included in our country. That has been what I have done for almost 50 years of my life.
What do you believe makes you prepared for the presidency in a heartbeat away, basically on day one?
Sure. Having served as Speaker of the House in California, as you know, California is the world's 5th largest economy, the largest state in the union. I led at a time when we went through the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. I led in a very bipartisan manner. I worked with Governor Schwarzenegger, worked well with my Republican colleagues. My background in healthcare, I've been in the emergency room. I have been in life and death situations, my experience in foreign policy. And over the years, what I'm the most proud of is my ability to bring people together, because I think that our country needs healing. I do believe that President Biden will be a healer in chief, and we certainly need that now. And I have believed I've played that role, too. I have worked across racial lines. I've worked across political lines. And I have focused on really my goal, which is to get work done on behalf of the American people, which is why you find people like Paul Ryan or Kevin McCarthy who have worked with me and worked with me well.
You know, last week you seemed to almost cringe at a description of you in Politico that described you as the anti-Kamala Harris.
Absolutely.
You didn't like it.
I don't.
You pointed that out. You complimented her career. But let me ask you this. What do you believe that statement was trying to convey about you? Set aside Kamala Harris. What do you believe they were trying to say about you?
You know, I don't know. I guess because I reacted so quickly to the idea of myself being pitted against another woman. And I didn't like that. I don't like that now. She's my senator. I've worked with her well. And so whatever that statement was trying to convey was definitely not my focus.
Let me turn to the issue of Cuba. A lot of people have turned to this issue with you as they've dug in. You spent some time there in the 70s as a young activists, I believe working with a group called the Venceremos Brigade, building houses in Cuba. You have rejected the idea that you were somehow celebrating the Castro regime.
Right.
But looking back, do you look back on that and think you were a bit naive?
Oh, I think as any 19-year-old would be, sure. In my early 20s, I went to Cuba to help the Cuban people to build houses. But over the last 20 years, Chuck, I have been working. One, I've always believed in bridging the divide between our two countries. Cuba's 90 miles away. But for the last 20 years, I've actually been working on health care related issues in Cuba. You know, the Cubans train U.S. doctors, and I've been recruiting those doctors to work in the inner city because they come in tuition free. The Cubans also have two medicines, one for diabetes, of which my mother died for, lung cancer, which my father died for, and I would like to have those drugs tested in the United States. Now, that doesn't excuse the fact that I know the Castro regime has been a brutal regime to its people. I know that there is not freedom of press, freedom of association. And interestingly, when I went in my late teens and early 20s, you know, one of the things that, one of the reasons was to build relations with the Americans that were there, because there were over 100 young people that were there, and all of us worked on different issues. Well, what's interesting is that we had the ability to come home and protest against our own government, but the Cuban people most certainly cannot do that. They couldn't do it then, and they can't do it now.
But Congresswoman, I have to say you sound a lot tougher on Castro now than you did when you described him as comandante and jefe when he died. And then you said something that I found interesting. You said you didn't quite realize how sensitive folks were in South Florida about this still.
No.
And,
go ahead.
And so I'm just curious, sort of, that you thought, well, Californians wouldn't mind that description, but it might offend Floridians. Forget that a minute.
Yeah.
It still seemed as if you had a soft view of Castro, if you will.
Yeah. And let me explain, too, because I think the use of the term comandante and jefe, what I meant by that is that clearly in Florida, that is a term that is endearing to him. I didn't see it that way. I was expressing condolences to the Cuban people, to the people in Cuba, not Cubans around the world. I don't think that is a toxic expression in California, but let me just say, Chuck, lesson learned. Wouldn't do that again. Talked immediately to my colleagues from Florida and realized that that was something that just shouldn't have been said.
But it's not, you said you were expressing condolences to the Cuban people. There's many people who believe that the Castro regime in general was keeping them confined, was stifling their freedom, that it actually, getting rid of Castro might have been a celebration to some. Yeah,
maybe. And in the island, I think it's slightly different because, you know, they certainly didn't have the freedom and wouldn't have the freedom to celebrate that. So I think that it is just very important the way the Obama administration had opened up relations with Cuba. I think the best way to bring about change on the island is for us to have closer relations with the country that is 90 miles away.
Just very quickly, I'm curious of your reaction. You were called Communist Karen yesterday by the Trump campaign, and Senator Marco Rubio said you would be the most, essentially imply that there was nobody who was ever been considered for the vice presidency that was seen as so much of a Castro sympathizer. How do you react?
Well, one, don't consider myself a Castro sympathizer. Number two, my position on Cuba is really no different than the position of the Obama administration. As a matter of fact, I was honored to go to Cuba with President Obama. I went to Cuba with Secretary Kerry when we raised the flag. So there really isn't anything different. And then, frankly, I believe the Republicans have decided to brand the entire Democratic Party as socialists and communists. So I'm not surprised by Rubio's characterization of me or of a role I would play if I were on the ticket.
Congresswoman Karen Bass, a Democrat from California, what do you think of all the extra scrutiny you're getting, all the extra attention, good or bad?
Well, you know what? I mean, it's okay because really my focus is about what this country is going through. I don't want to see another 154,000 Americans dead. And the reason for that is because the lack of leadership we have in the White House. We are 90+ days away from an election, and I am looking forward to watching President Biden raise his hand and being sworn in. If I'm on the ticket or not, I will work just as hard to get him elected because I believe he has the leadership to get us out of this crisis that we're in right now.
Congresswoman Karen Bass, really appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective with us, and most importantly, stay safe and healthy.